Taking down giant mythical monsters? A total breeze. Tracking down limited numbers of rare bugs? That's half the fun. Dealing with the political system based around the forced subjugation of other races under threat of divine retribution? We might have a problem there. I'm Cornelius Belmont, and let's talk about Link's desertion from Hyrule. So, quick disclaimer. This is a deeper look into the darker side of the Kingdom of Hyrule, and more importantly, the politics of it. It is my opinion, whether intentional or not, that art is always political, and tends to reflect certain views at the time of its creation. The Legend of Zelda, while trying to stay focused on the more fantastical side of things, still has some politics mixed into it, specifically war. I am not trying to make any comment with this video about our real world wars, or real life events that happened around the time of the making of these games, so try not to read too much into that. In this episode, I do end up talking about wars that have happened in Hyrule, and the consequences that came from them. In doing so, I may have solved one of the bigger mysteries in the entire Zelda series. The Hyrule royal family has a long history of doing questionable things, especially in the events leading up to Ocarina of Time. There is an entire dungeon in Ocarina that talks about events in the Civil War, not to mention how the hero of time is actually a war orphan raised by the Kokiri. Looking beyond Ocarina of Time, you might think that things were going in a better direction, but eventually Twilight Princess would come along and show us that the Kingdom of Hyrule didn't magically become a better place. Really, the story of the Kingdom of Hyrule is a pretty bloody one, and a topic largely skirted around by the main series, instead choosing to tell stories about a hero who struggles to overcome monsters, solve puzzles, and deal with problems largely tied to legend and divinity. As such, the political problems of the land go largely unexplored, but we do get hints of them here and there. The fundamental crux of this theory all routes from a simple question, and one that has no clear answer in canon as of yet. When Ganondorf is being executed at Arbiter's grounds, why did the Triforce of Power suddenly come to him? I intend to answer that question today, but I need to set the stage first, so let me go over a few premises to present my argument with. The hero of time at the end of Ocarina of Time is sent back in time before he opened the Sacred Realm. The exact point he is sent back to is a bit unclear, but since Zelda is in the garden when he approaches her, and not in hiding, I actually think this is before he met her originally. Regardless, this act removed the hero from the adult timeline, who at that moment was in possession of the Triforce of Courage. Upon his removal, the Triforce remained there, but shattered and then spread across the land. You can actually see how jagged and unclean the pieces are, unlike how pristinely cut the Triforce of Wisdom was when they purposely broke it. So the hero was sent back to being a child without the Triforce of Courage in his possession, but he retained the knowledge of his adventure. He then snuck into Hyrule Castle, confronted Zelda, and informed her that her visions of Ganondorf were true. Using the knowledge that he had, he was then able to prove Ganondorf's scheme. Simply knowing Zelda's lullaby, before Impa taught it to him, carried a lot of weight due to the secret nature of the song. From here, a few big things happened. With Ganondorf's scheme exposed, a war between the Gerudo and Hyrule Kingdom broke out. A war that would push the Gerudo people further into the desert, forcing them to abandon their home in Gerudo Canyon. Meanwhile, Link, who was still far too young to join the Knights, ended up going on a quest to find his friend Navi, with Zelda giving him the Ocarina of Time as a gift. He then left for the Lost Woods, where the event of Majora's Mask happened. Though I imagine the problems with the Goron mines and Jabu Jabu would have been fixed somehow, whether by the royal family or Link himself. After the events of Majora's Mask, things become a bit more unclear, and so we have to turn to Twilight Princess to fill in those blanks. Here are some of the important highlights. The Gerudo War happens. Arbiter's Ground is built, possibly renovated from the Spirit Temple. A council of sages is created by the Kingdom of Hyrule, which are likely made up of Hylians or maybe Sheikah, but probably Hylians. The Pedestal of Time with the Master Sword, and possibly the whole Temple of Time itself, is moved to the Sacred Grove in Faron Woods. It is unclear how the Pedestal of Time can be moved, considering it acts as an entrance to the Sacred Realm, and more specifically, the Temple of Light created by Rauru. The Sacred Grove can only be fully accessed with the use of Zelda's Lullaby. There is also a running theory that the temple in the Sacred Grove is actually the Temple of Light, but that remains unclear. Zelda Encyclopedia clearly states that the Temple of Time is connected to the Sacred Realm, and that the Temple of Light was built at that connection. As such, in Twilight Princess, you do enter the Temple of Time complete with the Song of Time playing in the background. But after using the Master Sword as a key in the pedestal, a path opens that may actually be leading into the Temple of Light. In my theory here, I assume that the Temple of Time, the Temple of Light, and the Sacred Realm are all connected to each other. Here are some important things related to the Hero of Time that we should make note of. He became a Hyrule Knight. He has at least one offspring, likely becoming the grandfather to the Hero of Twilight. He becomes the Hero Shade. He wants to pass on sword techniques to the Hero of Twilight, and he laments not being remembered as a hero. He also displays knowledge of various songs, including Zelda's Lullaby, the Song of Healing from Majora's Mask, Requiem of Spirit, Prelude of Light, the Goron's Lullaby from Majora's Mask, the Twilight Princess main theme, and the Ballad of Gales, which is from Wind Waker. I don't know why he knows the Ballad of Gales, but while researching this, I made note that the ending part is almost identical to the Minuet of Forest, a song that he would know. Maybe there was a mix-up when creating the game, or this could be a future theory waiting to happen. Anyhow, allow me to connect the dots and tell you a story of why Link deserted Hyrule. Upon returning to Hyrule from Termina, the hero continued to adventure around Hyrule looking for his friend Navi. During this time, the Gerudo War had started, something that Link tried to stay away from. For about 7 years, he adventured around. During this time, he would reach the borders of Hyrule, and to the south, just past the Faron Woods, he would discover an area that looked peaceful with a small growing settlement in it. This area just beyond the border would be known as the Ordana Province. After years of searching, he either did or did not find Navi again, but he did return to Hyrule to enlist as a knight. As part of the Hylian military, which was still at war with the Gerudo, he got to see firsthand how the military was dealing with them as well as prisoners of war. The whole experience reminded him of what he saw from his journey through time, including the torture and execution of prisoners in the Shadow Temple. At the same time, he also had first-hand knowledge of the devastation that Ganondorf could bring to Hyrule if he received the divine power of the Triforce. And even with his political power as the king of the Gerudo, he was proving to be a major problem for the kingdom. Something that caught the hero's attention was the construction of a new execution site in the Gerudo Desert, known as the Arbiter's Grounds. Not only was this a new prison, but a council of sages was appointed by the royal family. The sages that he knew were made up of a diverse cast of races across Hyrule, which happened to include a Gerudo, and so the act of choosing solely a group of Hylians concerned him as to the type of judgments they would make, especially when the Gerudo War would eventually end. Moving the Temple of Time from Castletown also caught his attention, something that may have been done to prevent the destruction of the capital, similar to what Link saw and told the royal family about from his visit to the future. This action involved moving the Master Sword and its pedestal along with it, both of which acted as an entrance to the Temple of Light and the Sacred Realm. Above all, though, what weighed most on his mind was how the war with Gerudo functioned. You see, the royal family, even in the Civil War, had a trump card that they could always use. That, of course, being the Triforce. An object largely used for political power, had potentially very real consequences for whoever opposed them, and the internal races of Hyrule were well aware of the legends behind it. The Gerudo, on the other hand, had their own legends, but were very much aware of the relic the royal family held, and that was in fact the source of Ganondorf's desire. The knowledge that Link had told the royal family had put them in an unusual position, which was that they could not use the Triforce, though they could of course still threaten to. If they did actually use the Triforce, then they knew it would split, leaving a piece in the hands of the user, while the other two pieces would leave and find those most aligned with its virtues. Considering Ganondorf was one of those people previously, it was far too much of a threat to even consider letting him gain the Triforce of power, and so the option of using the Triforce was simply out of the question. With this development, the war had to be fought on normal terms, which meant a slow expansion into Gerudo territory until they could either force a surrender or successfully capture Ganondorf. This in turn did terrible things to the Gerudo people as a whole, and the kind-hearted Hero of Time became resentful of the terrible acts he was doing on behalf of the royal family. Eventually Ganondorf was defeated and captured, and the Gerudo were at the mercy of the Kingdom of Hyrule. Link was unsure of what would happen to the Gerudo people, but forced subjugation to the kingdom seemed like the most optimistic outcome. He also had no knowledge of the Twilight Realm, or that the royal family would consider sending the remaining Gerudos there, similar to what had been done to the interlopers centuries earlier. Out of concern for the Gerudo people, it was then that Link requested an audience with the now Queen Zelda. In the garden, he would make his case to her that the Gerudo could appoint Nabooru, Ganondorf's second in command, as the new chief of the tribe. Link was aware of Nabooru, and knew that she was honorable since she was a candidate to be the Sage of Spirit. He was also aware that she had been brainwashed by the witch Twinrova. He would make a case for her about how she opposed his plan initially and could be trusted. Zelda would be sympathetic towards Link's views, but with the knowledge of the interlopers from the past, she would end up choosing to subjugate the Gerudo people. It was this that broke Link's faith in the royal family as well as Hyrule. Link continued to serve with the knights, though he did so to monitor the situation than to actually fight for Hyrule. He kept an ear out trying to find Twinrova, who at present remained unaccounted for, and as such many of the Gerudo remained under their mind control. Eventually the execution of Ganondorf was set and announced publicly, though even the knights and thus Link were unaware of internal conflicts about how to deal with the Gerudo king. The Council of Sages secretly considered a movement to seal him away in the Twilight Realm in place of an execution. a fate that was reserved for those who attempted to take the Triforce from the royal family. Link planned his next move, unaware that the Mirror of Twilight even existed. His plan was to enter the Sacred Realm and use the Triforce, purposely causing it to split, and in doing so, removing its divine power from the hands of the royal family. He needed to make sure this happened after Ganondorf had been killed, because he did not want the Triforce power to end up in his hand. His wish would be to summon Twin Rova to the Temple of Time, just outside the Temple of Light, where they would be trapped and he could kill them. Once gone, their brainwashing of the Gerudo people, including Naburo, would pass. He would then leave the temple, returning the Master Sword to its pedestal, and flee Hyrule to the south border, intending to start a new life at the settlement there in the Ordana province. Eventually the day came. However, Link only had limited knowledge of the situation. The sages had Ganondorf chained up, but still debated his fate, an argument that would continue until midday. Link awoke early that day, a little before dawn. Instead of his knight armor, he donned his old green tunic, packing his armor into his backpack. He was aware that they had moved the Temple of Time, or more specifically, the Master Sword and its pedestal. But it didn't matter, because he could always reach it. He secretly made his way into the garden, perhaps hoping to see Zelda one last time. Sadly, it was empty. He walked up to the window that he had met her at, placing the Ocarina of Time there, knowing that she would find it. The sun began to creep over the walls of the castle, and he knew it was time to go, for with all prisoners, Ganondorf would be executed at dawn. Pulling out a simple wooden ocarina given to him many years earlier, he then played the song Prelude to Light and proceeded to warp to the pedestal with the Master Sword. The sight of the new Temple of Time was different than he expected, now being in the forest. He was used to exploring strange new places, though. He drew the Master Sword in front of him, and eventually made his way through a strange door that took him to a more spiritual form of the temple. It reminded him of the Chamber of Sages. After messing around a bit in there, he found a connection to the Temple of Light, and from there an entrance to the Sacred Realm. After some more exploration, he finally came upon what he was looking for: the golden power of the gods, the Triforce. He felt that he had been exploring for hours, and was approaching midday. After all, his adventure in Termina had taught him how to judge the passage of time, even in strange locations. With him certain the execution had happened, he proceeded with his plan. He briefly wondered what would happen if he was wrong, but justified in his mind that if Ganondorf were still alive and received the Triforce of Power, he could just go and fix that problem like last time. After all, he wasn't a kid anymore. He cleared his mind and focused on the task at hand. He would wish for the Gerudo sisters, Kotake and Kome, to appear trapped in the main hall of the Temple of Time. He nodded to himself, reached out, and touched the Triforce. A bright light later, two of the pieces vanished from sight, leaving only courage remaining. It then too vanished as a mark appeared on his hand. It was time to go. Sure enough, in the main hall stood the two hags he remembered, Kotake and Kome. They were confused and bickering with each other, but Link was in no mood to put up with their antics. Even after the two combined into the form of Twin Rova, his advanced years of training as a knight, along with the Master Sword, made quick work of the two. He had done it. Everything was going according to plan, or so he thought. Midday at Arbiter's grounds, the sages were gathered around a bound Ganondorf. They had finally made up their mind to execute him. The Sage of Water levitated the sword of the six sages and with amazing speed thrust it into the abdomen of Ganondorf. The light of the sword burned through his body, and then he slumped over dead. Little did the sages know, just a moment earlier, the Triforce of Power had made its way from the Sacred Realm into the man before them. His body twitched as he revived. the symbol glowing on his right hand. Breaking the chains like string, he rushed forward, grabbing and crushing the Sage of Water, the Sword of the Six still impaled in his body. With his would-be executioner now dust in the air, the other sages looked on in shock. Ganondorf pulled the sword out from him. The sages all looked up to the Mirror of Twilight, realizing it was the only thing left they could do. Upon activating it, Ganondorf was banished into the Twilight Realm. Zelda had just come to the garden when she noticed something shiny resting on the windowsill. She wandered over to it, her walk becoming a sprint as she recognized the Ocarina of Time, and she felt a terrible feeling, for she hated how her last conversation with Link ended. Putting the instrument up to her lips, she played the song Zelda's Lullaby. Its notes offered little comfort. Right as the song finished, before her eyes, she saw the mark of the Triforce appear on her hand. She closed her eyes and immediately realized what Link had done. Link made his way south towards the border of Hyrule and to a new life. The years passed, and the settlement eventually grew into Ordon Village. Link found a partner and had a child. Over the years, he got occasional news about Hyrule and its current events. The royal family continued to use the Triforce as a political tool, despite the fact they no longer had access to the whole thing. It was, after all, in their best interest to suppress the knowledge, which also involved suppressing any knowledge of the hero and his involvement. This left a bitterness in Link. He did learn, though, that a new chieftain of the Gerudo was chosen after the demise of Ganondorf, and that the kingdom was making a more diplomatic approach to introducing the Gerudo back into it. However, the relationship wouldn't flourish for generations to come. As for the ultimate fate of the Hero of Time, that remains unknown. What is known largely comes from the interpretation of the hero's shade seen in Twilight Princess, and it implies a violent death. Perhaps he died protecting Ordon Village from some threat, or that eventually the Kingdom of Hyrule learned of his location and came to bring him to justice. It's even possible that he eventually felt guilt for his actions and went to turn himself in, perhaps arranging some deal to protect Ordon Village and annex the region. Those are just some possible guesses, but all three seem like likely candidates considering the theory I have weaved here. Thank you guys for watching the episode. This is a new channel and it will need all the support it can get, so please like and subscribe to help it grow. Going forward, my channel may not be focused entirely on Zelda theories, but considering it is one of my favorite franchises, it's likely to get a lot of the spotlight. In them, I tackle some interesting theories that I've never seen other YouTubers talk about. Feel free to leave your comments below regarding the video, and I will make sure to try to answer them. I welcome all feedback, though I request you keep it constructive. Thanks again for watching. This is Cornelius Belmont signing off.